What's up, everyone? I'm Chris Hayzel, and I'm the digital video guy here at Musio. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Iceland. Now, I've always found that there are a few good ways to experience a culture, right? Like, get to know it a little bit. You know, there's obviously going to the place and meeting the people, which is my personal favorite. But then there's food, right? You can tell a lot about a culture through its culinary traditions. And last but certainly not least is art, and by extension, music. Now, it's no secret that music is a universal language, and if you've ever been lucky enough to play music with someone from another country, you would be hard-pressed to deny that. But you would also be keenly aware of the distinct differences between musical cultures. Things as simple as rhythmic foundation or tonal structures, or even the instruments that are present in the music, are all shaped by centuries of environmental influences that are unique to that region. War, religions, even weather and available resources mold that region's music much in the same slow and steady way that wind and water can carve stone. It's like thousands of years of history and happenstance culminate into one distinct musical dialect. And an amazing example of this is Iceland. Now, when the Musio team traveled to Reykjavik to record an Icelandic sample library, they turned to the local musicians to teach them about Iceland's traditional instruments, where they come from, how they're played, and why they have the characteristics that they have. And from what I understand, it was an incredibly eye-opening and educational experience for the team members that were there. But I wasn't there. In fact, all of this happened long before I ever joined the team. And with the release of Musio's Iceland and Women of the North libraries, it's only natural that I would want some kind of a crash course. Well, while I was conducting the interviews for the Iceland video, I got that opportunity in the form of a conversation with Veigar Margeirsson. Now, Vegar is a very accomplished composer, and he's an Iceland native. He's the guy that Mike Patti called to get the sessions set up at Studio Sørland. We thought it would be a good idea to get an interview with him because, you know, none of us are actually Icelandic. But then I thought it would be cool to just have a conversation, record that conversation, and then when the time was right, release that conversation to all of you as a podcast. Because yes, these are really cool sample libraries. And yes, we hope you enjoy them. But we wanted to give you the opportunity to dive a little deeper and learn a little bit more, just as we did, about Iceland's unique and interesting musical heritage. In the conversation, we talk about Iceland's history, what seems to be the national attitude of Icelanders, how that has shaped the music, and what we felt each of us could take away from that. We also just kind of talked about composing and music in general because, you know, it's a podcast. What are you going to do? So with that, we present to you the very first episode of... Do we have a name? Did we come up with a name for it?
No.
Okay. So with that, we present to you the very first episode of... and my conversation with Mike Patti and Veigar Margeirsson.
My wife's actually a professional makeup artist. I should have called her in here.
So, do I pronounce your name Veigar?
Yes, correct.
And how do you pronounce your last name?
I don't. Margeirsson.
Margeirsson.
Son of Margeir. So my son is Veigar's son, and my daughter is Veigar's daughter. So that's how we do it up here.
That's awesome. So, like, before we dive into Iceland, like, Vegar, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us a little bit of your backstory.
I sound a little bit American because I lived in America for 20 years. I was born in Iceland in 1972. Should I say that? Should I really give away how old I am? And I always been interested in music. And I grew up in a town about 30-40 minute drive from Reykjavik. It's called Keflavik, and had a great music school. When I was a kid, I started playing trumpet at the age of 10, and played in marching bands, and just got into, like you guys may have as well, when I was 12, 13, 14, started playing in rock bands, playing by ear. You know, when I got confirmed with the confirmation is a big deal in Iceland, people would get like a stereo for their room or something as a gift. I got a Roland Juno 2 synth,
Nice.
which I don't have anymore. But, you know, I was always playing in bands, and I also had the ability to play by ear kind of easily. And I have a feeling, Mike, you can relate to that, because I think you do as well. And I got interested in, you know, arranging and songwriting and composing. And when I was in my early 20s, I got a chance to tour internationally with a big jazz rock fusion band called Mezzo Forte.
What were you doing with Mezzo Forte?
I was playing backup keyboards, and I was playing trumpet in the horn section.
Yeah, you sent me one of their songs. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was probably Garden Party, their biggest hit.
Yeah, that's the one.
Still a big hit. And these guys are my friends to this day. But I kind of discovered early that I didn't want to be a touring musician. I liked writing music. I liked playing music. I liked traveling. I didn't really like touring in a band. I don't really know why. It just wasn't me. Also, I became a father fairly young, and I'm always been I'm a family guy. You know, I like having somewhat of a regular home life, seeing my kids often, and so on. But I moved to the U.S. in '93 after I was touring, and I went to Berklee College of Music, and I studied jazz trumpet. Really wanted to have my own big band, which is a great way to make no money and spend a lot of work writing. Then I transferred to the University of Miami, and I did a master's there in composing and arranging. And then added 1 year at University of Southern California, USC in LA, and that 1 year became 16 years. You know, started building a career in LA, and then I still have a business there. I still do a lot of work there, but I live in Reykjavik, Iceland. So I kind of get the best of both worlds.
And how did you two meet?
I think
Vegar. So Vegar is a composer. So I'm an owner of a sample company. So I tend to know lots of composers, but I think you had emailed long time ago, maybe 10 or more, 12 years ago, about a problem that you were having with one of our instruments. And you just instant messaged me on, I guess it was Facebook at the time.
Yeah, I think I asked around, and somebody said, just email the owner or something. Just message the owner. Are you digging up that original message?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to find. Let's see. Yeah, it was in 2010. All right, May 2nd, 2010. You said, Vegar says, "Hey, Michael, I'm a fellow composer and DP user. I found your YouTube channel, and I find your DP stuff very insightful. Thanks for posting it. Regards, Vegar."
Okay.
Of course, you said something nice about me, so I was like, I like you. Yeah, and then, we were working on some technical nerd stuff, because at that time, that was like 13 years ago, in order to have a full orchestra session on your computer was a very unique thing, like to have all of these sample libraries. So there were different workarounds, and there was something called Plogue Bedule that we were using.
Oh my God, yeah.
And I know Vegar was getting that set up. I had a bunch of YouTube videos. It's super nerdy stuff, but like I had it figured out, and then we went back and forth just to get you set up. Get your composing set up.
I remember that it was so good about making use of unused RAM on your computer, like tapping into it somehow and making everything a little bit more fluid. But I think the first time I heard about you, or maybe it was after, you wrote this cue for Audio Machine.
I wrote a lot for a company called Audio Machine, which does motion picture advertising.
Yeah. And I own a company called Pitch Hammer Music that does similar things. And I had heard some of your music with them, with Paul's company.
Yeah.
And thought to myself, this guy knows how to write. Very crafty adventure writing.
Thanks, man. Well, that was a fun, not to go off on a tangent, but that was a fun time in the trailer music world. Around 2010, 2011. Yes. it was like, you know, Harry Potter was kind of ending. I mean, there's a lot of fantasy, family adventure kind of stuff coming out.
Yeah.
And that was that style of music where you could actually write melodies and, you know, it didn't all have to be D minor drones.
Yes.
Which we have all had to write too. But
oh yeah, I can't tell you how many D minor drones I've done.
But yeah, you got to write stuff that was like, you know,
exactly. I just appreciate like crafty composition.
Yeah.
Where the craft comes through, whether it's like written in 1920 or 2020, this just, you know, I just like hearing when somebody does something that knows how to just craft a composition.
Well, and something that's interesting, right? Like,
yes.
It like any music, you want to hear something that's interesting, that kind of makes you think about it a little bit, but not too much.
And unfortunately, when it comes to trailer music, since we're talking about it, a lot of times it has to be easily digestible when it comes to like how you voice your chords or how complex is your chord progression and so on. So,
right.
One of my old mentors said to me once, he said, "This is really great stuff, but it's way too complicated. You must make this for the public. Like, you can write this for your symphonic album. Don't write it for my trailer album." And I was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, so it's sort of like the idea of like music for musicians versus music for the general public. Yeah.
He also told me the joke, what's the difference between a jazz guitarist and a rock guitarist?
What?
A rock guitarist plays 3 chords for 10,000 people. A jazz guitarist plays 10,000 chords for 3 people.
That's a good one. I'm going to have to keep that in my back pocket. All right. So, you know, Musio has this World Adventure series that we're getting ready to release. Mike, just for the uninitiated, can you give us sort of a bird's eye view of what the World Adventure series is?
Yeah. So it started by traveling to different countries and sampling instruments and musicians within those countries. And we started off with 4 countries, Ireland, Scotland, Iceland, and South Africa. My family and I were already traveling. We sold everything. We sold our house and took the kids on a trip around the world. And we thought, well, it'll be really smart if we're doing this. Why don't we mix business with it too? Selfishly.
Sorry, I remember seeing a Facebook post about you traveling the world. And I said, hey, man, it'd be so awesome if you came to Iceland. Are you coming to Iceland? And you commented or sent me a message right away and sent me a location of your Airbnb for Iceland. And from there, we started talking about it.
Right. I guess, yeah. So I guess it was your idea. You got that. It's like,
I saw you were traveling the world and just spontaneously asked, is Iceland on your list? And sure.
That's right. Okay. So delete that, Chris. He said the correct thing. So it's Vegar who reached out to me.
Yes.
And, but that was just to hang out. But then we're like, well, maybe we should record some instruments just for fun. Maybe at your place, like whatever, like not a big deal.
Once you decided that you were going to record some instruments in Iceland, what happened then? How did you start to get it together?
I seem to remember saying, hey, if you need a place to work or do something, feel free to come. And then I got the sense from you that you wanted to kind of take this a lot further. It's like, hey, I'm here for a little bit. You want to do a real sample session. And I mean, I have an ISO booth. I can fit a couple of people in there, and I got preamps and mics. But when I do a real recording, I like to go somewhere else. I like to go to Sealand. And also, Iceland is about 400,000 people. Reykjavik is about 200,000 people. And there's a surprising amount of really good studios here. If you compare to where we are just south of the Arctic Circle in a volcanic island with not that many people, there is a surprising amount of culture available here.
Why do you think that is? Like I've noticed that it seems like despite the sort of smaller population, there seems to be a large proportion of those people who are into the creative arts and things like that.
I have a few theories on it. If you would ask 10 Icelanders about it, you'd probably get 10 different answers, but I think there would be some kind of a common theme. There's a phrase here which is þetta, reddast, which means this will be okay. Things will turn out okay. And people use it almost to a fault. It's like, it'll be fine. It'll be okay. We have this just do it attitude. Hey, it'd be cool to have a burger place, in our neighborhood. Yeah, it would be really cool. Why don't we just open a burger place? And then a month later, two guys opened up a burger place somewhere. I mean, there's stories like that everywhere. People they just don't think about stuff that much. They just do it. There's a certain amount of fearlessness and foolishness and just like, you know what? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Is anybody going to die? No. Let's do it. And, it's just like, people just go for it. Another reason is the winters are long and they're dark and you have to stay inside a lot. So you gotta have something to do. The summers are long and bright, play out all day. But when you get into December, we're talking 5 hours of daylight. It's cold and windy, snowy. And so you just have to find stuff to do. Historically, when it comes to media, we're way behind you guys. Until 1986, there was only one TV channel, and there was no TV on Thursdays, and there was no TV in July because the staff had Thursdays off and they had a summer vacation in July. So we just had to find other things to do. But when it comes to music, arts, theater, etc., the education system is just very strong. And there's always been a big belief in the arts. There's a lot of grant systems. There is a salary system for creators. People generally have good access to good schools, good music schools, good higher education. It doesn't make you bankrupt if you want to go and get a bachelor's degree, and whether it's in the arts or something else, So those are just a few of the things, but I think mostly people are just not afraid to try stuff and fail. If people fail, like a big deal. I've screwed up. No one's going to care tomorrow. So there's just like, they just do stuff. I mean,
that's interesting too, because like it's always seemed to me like there's a really big, like when you look at some of the instruments that you guys recorded in the Iceland session and you hear Icelandic music, and there always seems to be this really big sort of emphasis or at least inherent nature of exploration and experimentation that you guys seem to have.
I think Björk is a great example. She does stuff that, like, man, I never would have thought of that, or no one would have thought of that. And I think that's just this I think a lot of it comes from, historically, we didn't have a lot of things to work with. I mean, even when I was starting out in music, some of the studios were pretty primitive, and there weren't Steinways everywhere. They're just like, there's just like, we had to just use what we had. But I think it's somehow in our heritage, I think everyone's. Whatever your guys' heritage is, I think some of the experiences of your parents and grandparents and great grandparents are somehow like woven into your DNA, and just it kind of travels through us.
It sounds like there are a lot of like complex sort of intricacies from history and from your guys' heritage that all sort of feed into this musical history that you guys have. How do you think that or do you see that sort of in modern Icelandic music?
What I see now, like the spectrum of music has gotten so broad in a short amount of time, but I do see a lot of experimentation. there's just less people trying to fit something. You know what I mean? Just
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm gonna do this. If somebody likes it, great. If not, it'll just fade out and I'll do something else. Rather than there's less concern with, I wonder where this is gonna fit. It's also feeding over into, stage plays, filmmaking. Our filmmaking has improved greatly in the last 30 years. The history is always there, but I think that happens very subconsciously. I don't think people are necessarily trying to bring the heritage with them. It just kind of happens.
Mhm.
But then again, you'll ask nine other people and you'll get nine other answers. So
Well, it's sort of unavoidable, right? Like when you think about, I do believe in the idea that music is a universal language, but
absolutely.
there are also very distinct differences between musical cultures, sort of like dialects of that
Yes.
language, right? And so like
Yes.
even things like rhythmic foundation or even tonal structures will sort of be different depending on where you go in the world.
Yes.
So it's sort of unavoidable, to carry that heritage with you into your music. Because when I listen to Icelandic music, you know, even between like the song you sent me from Mezzaforte and then Bjork and then Sigur Rós, they're even though they're wildly different genres, there is sort of a through line there.
Yeah.
There is something like the whole intro to that Mezzaforte song that you sent me. I was like, this sounds
Hmm.
of the region, and it's hard to put your finger on what that is, but it's like there's definitely something that connects everybody there.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear your take on it because I've like known that song since I was a teenager
Hmm.
and played it many times with them. And yeah, it's so hard to pinpoint what it is, but to me, the word that often comes to me is just it's open. And I don't
Hmm.
know. I think like if you listen to very old, recordings of farmers reciting, poems from their region, like in perfect fifths. It's very raw. Iceland is not very rich in folk music like some other neighboring countries are, like Norway, Sweden, Ireland, and the Celtic Isles. And we're it's our music is a bit more primitive when it comes to folk music, but
What do you mean by that? Well, like when you say it's more
we don't
primitive?
have as many instruments that are traditional. We really only have one Icelandic instrument called langspil, which means long play, which is just a little wooden box with one string, and that is like basically the heritage of our folk instruments. If we compare our folk music to, let's take an extreme example and say Brazil. All these amazing rhythms and syncopations and like this just army of instruments and stuff. We don't even have a fraction of that. Everything here is just cold and raw. I don't mean cold in a bad way. It's just a little primitive. I think it just bleeds through us where we come from. We can't turn it off. The art, like the artists who were successful, Johan Johansson, the late film composer. I knew him. He was just a lovely guy, really sharp. He loved movies and obscure movies, and he was asked in an interview once, like, how did you start, change your music so you got noticed by Hollywood? He said, I never changed anything. He said, I made music for years and nobody listened to it. But then all of a sudden, people started liking it, and then everybody started liking it. And said, I didn't really change anything. I just wrote the kind of music I wanted to hear because I wasn't hearing it anywhere else. And I was like, man, what a great answer that is.
I mean, that's the Mike, are you also an overthinker of music? I know I am.
I think, well, yeah, if you're a professional and you're trying to get stuff done by 3 p.m., I don't think you can afford to. So sometimes the stuff we write is not really the best music, right? Sometimes it's just a little bit of a commodity. You're a craftsman at times. I miss the days. It's been a while where I've just kind of let myself write something that I enjoy,
Yeah.
and I'm a little bit jealous of people that have made a career out of doing that. Vegar and I are similar in the sense that we're building a business around music production, which is a different way of looking at music.
Mm-hmm.
You're serving something else with music, and that's a skill in itself. But it's something. It's probably something that like a Rick Rubin would think is horrible. Rick Rubin would say, "No, never write something for someone else. Write it for yourself."
Yeah.
But also, I think it's also we have families, and I'm just, for me personally, I can't believe someone would pay me to write music. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'm still amazed. It's the coolest thing, and I try to add maybe a little bit of heart and interest. Maybe if there's more time. I know that's how I think about it.
Yeah. I feel like it's also something that maybe comes with age a little bit. Like, I know that when I was younger, I had a lot less, inhibition when it came to writing music. Like, I could just sort of write whatever came to my head, even like with lyrics or whatever. I could write gibberish, just words that I thought sounded nice. And then when I read them back now, I'm like, yes, this isn't saying anything, but I thought it was super cool at the time. And then
Right.
as you get older, you start to become a little bit more self-aware. And, also like being a musician, it's not an easy road. You get your butt kicked along the way if this is something that you choose to do with your life. And I feel like all of those things contribute to, maybe being a little bit more self-conscious about music and stuff like that. Like if you haven't lived a life in music where you just sort of did whatever you wanted musically, and then you got good feedback for that, if throughout your life it kept being like, no, nobody wants to listen to that, no, you need to think about this differently and things like that, then that kind of informs the way that you come to it, right?
Yeah.
Which is maybe why, with Iceland, in Icelandic music, there is that sort of freedom of experimentation, or that through line of experimentation and expression, because maybe the cultural isolation that you sort of described, between being an island and also having to just be inside for so much of the year and those kinds of things, maybe that's a good thing, because there are less people in your face telling you like, no, that's not good.
I mean, historically, the first settlers came here in the 800s, and man, for about 1,000 years, this was a rough place. I mean, the weather sucked. It was cold and wet, and I mean, it's just like all we did was survive. This wasn't about living. I mean, it was we lived in mud houses, and it was wet and cold, and it's just like, I've got nothing to lose attitude. It's just like, I'm doing this, and if people don't like it, just like, they don't care. And I wish I was that guy, but I'm not. I find, like you were saying, Chris, I find myself, being a little bit more self-conscious and self-aware the older I get, which is weird because I care less what people say when I turn in a project. And if I get notes or something, I was like, whatever. It's like, yeah, I have to change it for the project. But I remember when I was starting out and I got notes or rejections when I was like in my early years in the business, I'd have a broken heart and just get destroyed from, having a track rejected or something. But then eventually I started understanding no one was saying I was bad. It was just like, it wasn't a fit for this particular project.
Yeah.
So, but I struggle with what Mike was saying, we're creating music for a service. It's yeah, that's a craft or a task in itself. Like you were saying, Mike, it's tricky, and I sometimes feel like I'm playing some kind of a delicate fight between the business me and the artist me. And sometimes it's easy and a lot of fun, but sometimes it's a little it's a little difficult.
Yeah. I think for
Yeah.
me, like, so I had a brief foray as a professional composer. I sort of fell into a career composing completely by accident. Um, but when that happened, I think it was for like a period of 5 years, like that was my job. And it made like the business aspect of it made it so much more complicated for me, where I was like, suddenly I wasn't enjoying making music outside of work hours anymore as much, because I was like, well, I've
Yeah.
been doing this all day. Um, I don't know. Being a musician and an artist is just complicated. It's so why would anybody
Yeah.
choose that to do
Because
it?
they
You know?
couldn't think of doing anything else, I
Yeah.
think.
There's
Yeah.
nothing else you can do. You're like, this is
Yeah.
what I do.
Yeah. I was asked that in a newspaper interview years ago. It's like, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? And I was like, man, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that for a long time. I was going to be an engineer when I was little, but that's just because my big brother's an engineer.
An audio engineer or just an
No,
engineer?
like civil engineer,
Oh, okay.
structural engineer.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
Something useful.
I will tell you, speaking of useful, one of the greatest pieces of advice I've ever gotten was in 2003 when my son was born. He was premature, born at Cedar Sinai in LA. And he was very premature, and he's 20 today and doing just fine. But he had an episode, he was 10 weeks in the hospital, in the NICU. There was like all kinds of, there was a big commotion, a bunch of people around his area, and we were just pushed away, and then everything calmed down, everything was okay, and his chief doctor, neonatologist, he was kind of telling me what was going on, everything was okay now, and then I was walking with him out in the hall, and I said, man, I feel like what I do is just pointless. I mean, here you are saving like tiny little babies, and I'm writing music for some movie that no one's gonna care about. And he was just like, man, Vegar, you got this all wrong. He said, everything is just as important as the next thing. I mean, when I'm done here, I need to go home. I listen to music. I read books. I watch TV. I watch movies. If I can't do that, I can't do this job. If I can't, feed my brain, feed my mind, feed my soul, I can't do what I do. He says, so don't think for a second that what I do is any more important than what you do. It's all equal. And I was like, wow, that was pretty profound for me when he said that. I still think what he does is a little bit more cool than I do and important, but it reminded me that like we all play a part in this overall thing.
That's really cool.
If you didn't make the samples, I wouldn't have source to work with, and then I couldn't do my job, and then the people who take my product and put it out there, they couldn't do their job, etc. So it all plays a part.
Well, and that kind of brings you to also like if you're ever feeling that, spending your time making music is useless, it might be helpful to consider that all of these different cultures, whether it's Iceland or Africa or, all of these super primitive cultures that were pretty isolated in their times, way, way back in the day, felt it was important enough to stretch a skin over a hollow piece of wood and make a drum and make music. It's something that we've been doing since the dawn of history, since
Yeah.
before history. And for some reason, there's this innate drive in us, not to just to make it, but to hear it, to absorb it, and those kinds of things. And I wonder where that comes from, but it's
I
obviously
think
an
it's
important thing.
I think it's because it's something we do together.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of it.
So Vegar, like as you guys were preparing to do this, and like you knew that you were going to go into those sample sessions and sample these instruments, was there anything in your mind that was just like absolutely crucial for Cinesamples or Musio to get right in order to properly represent Icelandic music?
From my point of view, and I like you see this, and I knew that you weren't going to screw this up, is don't get a Norwegian composer the Norwegian choir to sing Icelandic or something like that. Make sure the wording and phrasing and the sounds phonetically or actually are authentic.
Yes.
And I know that you take that seriously, so that was never an issue. Because sometimes, what sounds Icelandic to you, spoken or sung by, somebody else, will not sound like that, to me. Do you know Bear McCreary, composer? Yeah, he came here to record the choir for God of War several years ago. And his producer, Pete Scaturo, who happens to be an old friend of mine, called me and said, "Hey, I need information on Norwegian choirs." I said, "Okay." He said, "Why are you calling me?" He said, "Well, it's got to be Old Norse." And I was wondering if you knew anybody in Oslo or something. I said, "No, if it's Old Norse, you need Icelandic, because Old Norse is much closer to Icelandic than Norwegian." So they ended up coming here and recording. They've been here a few times.
The choir that you guys used, right? Like that was I've heard it's a pretty active choir in Iceland, and they've done a lot of stuff. You said
We've
you
done a
know
lot of
them,
session
yeah?
work, I know.
Choir music is a very big part of our music heritage. Traditionally, there's a lot of singing. There are professional choirs. There's a lot of amateur choirs. There's women only choir. There's children's choirs. Every town has like a church choir or a male choir. So there's a like a big historic social element to singing together. It also
That's
has to do
interesting.
with the long nights, no TV on Thursdays, etc. So
Yeah.
I'll give you a personal example. There's a bar downtown called Kaldi. Kaldi is a beer brand. They have this really cool bar, and there's a honky tonk piano there. And I had some American friends with me, and the piano was there. It's like, "Hey, can you play?" I said, "Yeah, I'll play." So I started playing, and I started playing a song that all Icelanders know, and everyone stopped what they were doing and they sang the song,
That's
just
cool.
like full on. And then when I stopped, everybody was like, "Hey, great," clapped, and then she started to go do what they were doing. My friends were like, "What the hell happened here?" Uh, it's just like, you know, we unite in song, I guess, more than Americans kind of unite to their favorite sports team. It's a little different. It's just a little bit of a different thing. I mean, Americans typically don't get together. It's like, "Hey, let's all sing together." I never quite experienced that.
Yeah.
So
Not a common
it's got
No.
occurrence.
something to do with our culture. When you go like to your cabin on a Saturday, people bring a guitar and sing a few songs. Like, I don't know, it's just very normal here. I think it's just this part of togetherness, just to like right here, right now. It's a like very just it's the moment here. Everybody's together. I don't know. It's just if we didn't have music, or if somebody hadn't had the foresight of making a drum. Like, as I have a good friend who's a doctor. So he says, like, if we didn't have music, why would we want to save lives? I mean, what would be the point if we didn't have any arts or, music, movies? And it's like, what would be the point of getting out of bed in the morning if we had nothing to enjoy?
Yeah.
This is getting philosophical.
That's okay. I guess that's what podcasts are for, right? Or video
I guess
podcasts or chats.
so.
I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
I've been actually a little distracted. I'm sorry in the last few minutes.
Oh, no
I'm
worries.
working on a pitch deck.
Oh, okay.
There was nothing.
But so you've talked about how the seasons affect the music, and how your history and heritage of a vocal tradition affects the music, and
Mm-hmm.
and the sort of everything will be okay attitude.
Yeah.
But I'd be remiss if I didn't also draw attention to Iceland's incredible landscape. Like Iceland
Mm-hmm.
is known for this just otherworldly sort of visual landscape. How do you think that impacts the music of Iceland?
I think it's just in all of us somehow. I mean, I don't think there's a choice. I mean, we have a lot of lava, new and old. We have glaciers. It's stark. It's cold. It's in some senses it's brutal and like horrendous in a way and striking. It's very powerful though. Like if you take the landscape and the weather here, it's striking and it's just powerful. I mean, just these recent weeks, I mean, the area between Reykjavik and the international airport has been just shaking violently. There's a town of 4,000 people here called Grindavik that no one can live in right now because it's just been torn apart with big gaps in the town. And I have friends there, and everybody has to just find places elsewhere to live. It's just extreme power. But I think it's just like what I've said earlier. It's just like, this fearlessness in, a lot of the artists here, whether it's visual art or even, playwrights, authors, not to mention all the music. It's just this like, this is who I am and this is it, deal with it. I wish that was me every day. It's me some days, but not every day.
Yeah, I think we need all of those kinds of people. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we need the artists, the artists that are fearless and a little bit out there. But I don't know if we would want them to score a movie, right? Because it's a different skill set. Usually, sometimes that person will get hired to score the movie, and then someone like me or Vegar will be there behind the scenes to smooth it all
Yeah.
over.
No, you bring up a really important point. It's just like, there has to be this balance of things. And, well, Chris, I don't know you well enough yet, but Mike, we have this similarity, and you've already touched on it. Like we're creative guys. We got into this for the music. We didn't get into this for the spreadsheets and managing people and managing deadlines. But we need both, and at the end of the day, we're making music. We're working in the music business, which is like getting paid for that is pretty cool. Still,
Yeah.
just like you said, and you kind of reminded me, and there's a lot of people who would love to switch places with all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And I think anybody, like whether you're a successful musician or artist or not, a lot of the time, day to day, isn't music. It's something else.
Mhm.
Dealing with people, your team, travel. So it's not like you're doing music all the time.
No, it's a really good point. And that's not just for being a composer. Like that's if you're an artist too. Like my dad's an artist, and he's been working very regularly since like the 80s. And most of his time is spent sitting on airplanes. And
Is he a music artist?
he's a singer, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, he spends most of his time on airplanes. It's like out of a day, actually most of the time, maybe like 30 or 45 minutes of his day is singing. And then the rest of his day is like traveling, packing, dealing with the venue manager and getting paid out and all of those things. A lot of it is, the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I do want to ask is that like, you were part of sort of bringing this project to life, this Iceland leg of the World Adventure Series. And it's going to be coming out really soon. And like, as people start to open it up and start to play with it and experiment and explore these sounds, what do you, and this is for both of you guys, like, what do you hope that they take away from it?
Mike, you want me to start? Or
Yes.
Mike's working on his pitch deck.
Sorry.
We were just talking about
really,
how it's the business, right?
That's all I do is the business side.
I mean, this is like a cliche answer. I hope they find something that like they haven't heard before or they haven't seen before, and I hope what they can start using sparks something creative on their end. That's what I would hope. And I also hope that, it encourages them to explore more of Icelandic music and more of Icelandic arts in general. I mean, Iceland has been popular as a tourist destination in recent years, which is great. But a lot of people don't know much about it. I know that one of the great things about Musio and about Synsamples has always been the source has always been created very craftfully. So I know that, I'm not going to be dealing with some, latency issues or technical hissing noises or anything. So like I can just start using and start creating my own stuff with creating something. And so I know that it's going to be I know everything is well done, well executed. And, it's going to be a plug and play, enjoyable experience. Mike, you want to add to that?
I think you nailed it. I think obviously, number one, we want to make an instrument set that is inspiring for people that are writing music for film, TV, and games. And at the same time, to make sure that it's done with authenticity,
Yeah.
And if we can make sure that the people of Iceland actually appreciate it, then we know we've done something good.
I think they will,
because we could fake it, right? That's what we do in Los Angeles. That's all we do is fake things. But I think it could be cool to check both of those boxes.
Yeah, it's kind of like hoping that the sounds from this culture that sort of has this anything goes type of mentality, like you were explaining, hoping that these sounds sort of inspire that maybe in someone who doesn't come from there.
Yeah, I would hope so. Experimenting greatly and, not being afraid of making mistakes while doing it. So the famous phrase is þetta, reddast, which means this will be fine. Our plane leaves in 20 minutes. It'll be fine. No, I don't think so.
So if you're watching this, go open up the Iceland session and just start playing something, because it'll be fine. Don't worry too much about it. Just go explore.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for taking the time. Is there anything else that either one of you guys want to say? Or
well, I hope that volcano doesn't erupt on you guys.
Yeah.
What's the status on that? I've watched the news every day.
Looking less likely every day. They're saying the lava that's under the town is 90% hardened, but this area has woken up after 800 years of doing nothing. So
oh, wow.
There will be more activity in years and decades to come. So, we're dealing with a new reality here, that, the volcanoes are closer to the towns than we're used to, or they're like waking up again. But, it'll be fine.
A special thanks to Veigar Margeirsson for joining us for this chat and giving us a little more insight into Iceland's rich musical history. But don't take our word for it. Head over to musio.com to explore the Iceland and Women of the North libraries completely free for 30 days. And while you're there, don't forget to check out all of the other collections of premium virtual instruments that are included. If you enjoyed this chat and want to catch more, be sure to subscribe and keep an eye out for new episodes. Thank you all for listening.